Oh, our next reader, dreaming of becoming a detective one day. Marcia Zwilling once applied to LAPD and was almost hired until a ride-along in Hollywood ended in a near shootout. Realizing this was not her best idea, she promptly declined their offer and accepted a position as Liberace's assistant receptionist. I want to hear about that. And I don't think that that's the story she's going to tell. Marcia Zwilling.
Under a scorching Texas sun, I drove down the dusty road to my friend's ranch, sipping an extra-large cherry limeade from a nearby Sonic. Suddenly, I heard a blood-curdling scream coming from behind the barn. I've watched enough Discovery ID to know this couldn't be good, so I jumped out of the car and ran toward the scene. My friend Lynn, a fifth-generation Texas rancher who's normally outspoken, was silently staring down at a drowned squirrel bobbing in the horse's water tank. She quickly reached for a shovel and scooped the limp squirrel from the water and tossed it onto the ground. The training ingrained in me 30 years ago at the American Airlines Flight Attendant Academy suddenly came to mind. Remain calm in an emergency. Well, this certainly wasn't an emergency. I had a squirrel in peril and a giant red straw protruding from my cherry limeade, so I sprang into action. I flipped the squirrel on his back and began chest compressions with my 2 thumbs, counting out loud just like I had been taught. Then I inserted the straw into his tiny mouth and began blowing, synchronizing my mouth to mouth with the chest compressions. Lynn was bewildered, silently watching as I tried to resuscitate a squirrel back to life. "I think he moved," she shouted. Perhaps it was a reflex, or maybe my CPR was actually working. I pressed his little chest even faster, my thumbs making a squidgy sound on his soaking wet body. Eek, 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 blow. Eek, 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 blow. Then, to my amazement, the squirrel gurgled up some water. Our eyes met. He stared at me, very confused, probably wondering if I was the patron saint of squirrels. I was astonished. I had just resurrected a dead squirrel. As I transferred my patient to ICU, a cardboard box filled with hay, Lynn shook her head in disbelief, muttering under her breath, "Well, that's a goddamn first." I placed the squirrel in the shade under an oak tree and offered him reassurance. When I returned a half hour later, the box was empty. I heard a loud chirping from the tree above me. Staring down was a joyful squirrel, flicking his tail as if he were thanking me for saving his life. Then, grateful for another day, the born-again squirrel quickly scurried back up the tree and vanished. As I triumphantly walked back to my car, I realized I had never used my emergency training before, but I couldn't help but think, it's about time.